Let's Talk Oculus, a VR podcast, is proudly sponsored by the good folks at Patreon. If you want to support the show, join us on patreon.com/Let's Talk Oculus.
Super hot.
What's up, Oculus nerds? Welcome back to episode 180 of this very special edition of Let's Talk Oculus. It is episode 180, but it is technically the first ever revisited. We're going to be revisiting SuperHot VR. We're going to look back at the game when it came out and such, and we'll get into that in all of its glory. But I'm joined by my co-host Samson, who's going to go through this with me as well. Samson, how you feeling?
I am feeling super hot.
You do it really well. Like after the last time we had a podcast and you did it, I was like, wow, he's actually nailed it. So
thank you.
Yeah, are you looking forward to talking about some super hot today?
Yeah, it felt good. Dan, I've now added another game that I finished in 2025 here.
Yeah, you've added it to your list. So this can be a bit of a different episode for those of you who have been around for a while. Okay, we're just going to focus on SuperHot today in terms of like questions and comments that we've got and such, and VR news and all that jazz. That will be saved for next week's podcast episode. But this is the brand new podcast series Revisited, and this is where we will go back into the Quest archives and pick out some of the most iconic games, and maybe some of those games that also went under the radar, and give it a new lease of life. And we'll be taking you through the history of the game, exploring the state of VR at the time of the release. We'll have some quick facts, some memories, we'll go into how it holds up today, because we've been playing it a lot. Samson's finished it, I've got stuck right at the end, but that's just the way it goes. I have spoiled it for myself though. I did watch the playthrough. I was like, I have to see how it ends before I talk about this. But yeah, and we'll also talk about its influences on the VR industry. And in this episode, as you've heard, SuperHot VR is the one that we're going to focus on. Now, before we actually start, there is a comment that I do want to read out because it is related to the actual episode itself. Samson, would you mind reading out the comment from Matt?
I'd love to. From Matt. Great episode, guys. I'm excited about the new Revisited series. I'm a big fan of SuperHot VR. Some of my favorite older games are Star Wars Vader Immortal, Pistol Whip, Trover, and Red Matter. Cheers.
Absolutely. I feel like we're going to cover at least a couple of those games in the future. If maybe not, maybe all of them, to be honest.
I mean, I revisited Red Matter.
Yeah, very recently.
Late last year. Yeah.
Yeah, very recently.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like the Star Wars Vader Immortal is on everybody's list because that's probably the first game anyone played when they got a Quest, whether it was the first one or the second one, to be honest with you. But
it was definitely early on for me.
More of those games in the future. I also do want to quickly shout out Toby. He also commented saying, I'm in long-term care and soon we'll be getting a Quest 3 headset here. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks, guys. Great podcast. Thanks so much, Toby. I hope, obviously, you said you enjoy the podcast and such, which is great. I hope it brings you joy. And if you have any thoughts on what games you kind of like and you want some recommendations from us, let us know. Comment as well, or even better yet, go into the Discord, because it sounds,
come on down.
I feel like we're pretty good with the recommendations, but we're no match for our community. You post a question in the Discord and you have the likes of Pow Pow, who's probably played every game under the sun. You have Live Open Mike, who has proof that he's played every game under the sun on his YouTube channel. And a lot more people in there who have got even more experience than us when it comes to VR. So obviously you can ask us, but then if you want to join the Discord, that is a great place to start. But as I mentioned, we will talk about more comments and questions that did come in from last week's episode next week. For now, Samson, it is super hot. I'm not as good as you. I'm not as good as you.
Hot.
Yeah,
now you've rubbed off on me, Dan.
That was still pretty good. I thought you just played that on a YouTube thing. That was like,
oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Samson, let's talk about first. Let's go into just our memories of SuperHot VR. This is a game that I realized actually once doing the script for the show that I actually didn't own on Quest, because I had played it on the PSVR 1 back in those days, which was 2017.
Wow, old school.
Yeah, so I didn't realize I didn't own it on Quest. I never bought it on Quest 2 or anything. I did have the demo, but maybe, I don't know, when I got the Quest 2, I played the demo. I was like, you know what, I'm good. I've played this game to death already.
I get it. Yeah.
But yeah, I played on the PSVR 1 originally, and even though the PSVR 1 didn't have controllers as good as like the Oculus Touch controllers and such, it was still good enough because there were still motion controllers, and it worked perfectly for this game because you don't have to move in terms of like traverse with like a stick or anything like that. You'd stay in one spot and then you're just kind of moving your own body in real time to try and get around it. So it was fine. It was tough to play in the smaller space, and obviously PSVR 1 being a wired headset, I definitely found it tricky with that, but at the same time, it was all I knew. So I think now I'm a bit spoiled when we have a Quest and I can literally fall around and go around and everywhere and such. But with the PSVR 1, I couldn't do that, but it was still just fine. But yeah, what a great game it was at the time. I remember just fond memories of just the mechanics feeling so different and so unique, and it was definitely the first time I think I really found a game that really used VR in terms of all of its like qualities that VR had to offer. Played some other games and such, and it was cool doing like the shark attack and all that stuff, but this was one that it felt like at the time that there was like this only could be done in VR essentially. But little did I know there was actually a flat screen version of this game that actually came out first and such. And I did play the flat screen game later on Xbox through Game Pass, like maybe a few years later. But it was fun, but because I was so used to the VR version, I just couldn't get on with it. I even to this day, like
so different. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried the flat screen one again in preparation of this pod, and I still don't feel like it's don't get me wrong, like if this was the first way I played it, this is really cool, but because I'm so spoiled with the VR, I'm like, I feel like that's the way to play this game. It's different because you can actually move around the map and such, but it just feels like the VR version is the way it should be done. So yeah, I didn't actually play much of the flat screen version in the end of the day. But yeah, that was like my brief memories of the game. I mean, we'll talk about more of it as we go through obviously this episode, but what were your like early memories when you first got it?
Well, Dan, SuperHot VR was the 5th game I ever bought. I bought it Christmas Day 2019. The first game I bought was Beat Saber.
Classic.
Then The Climb, Richie's Plank Experience, Thrill of the Fight, and SuperHot.
What a great lineup of 5 games that is.
All within the first month of me buying the Quest. Yeah. That was my launch lineup, if you will.
Fantastic launch lineup. Maybe one of the best launch lineups of that.
Yeah, definitely. And then I didn't buy another game until July. So this was
Exactly.
before I was buying every game. Then starting in July, I have a lot more purchases.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I wish I remembered more of my first experience of it, Dan.
Sure.
I don't really.
It's a long time ago.
But I do remember that I got stuck. I did not look up. I was not really used to VR. And so when you have to put the VR headset on, I never really looked up, and I looked all around that room for much longer than I'd like to admit before I realized that, I put that on. Like, I actually have to put that on.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is VR in VR. This is so meta. This is insane. And once I ultimately realized that it's a puzzle game, I was pretty locked in. I was sold. I was like, oh, I get it. It's just I am part of the puzzle piece, and I just had to figure out how to get to the end of it, which is breaking all the red people.
Breaking. I love how you said breaking, not killing. Breaking all the red people.
Yeah, I mean, they break.
I guess they are. They're like made out of glass, right? Like red glass in a way.
I mean, if I hit you in the leg with a bottle, you're not going to die. Yeah.
It would just shatter. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Can you remember, like, would you say, like, when you realized it was a puzzle game, did you think it wasn't? Do you think it was like a shooter, just like a first person
I
shooter?
don't know really how I came about SuperHot. I think since I bought it Christmas Day, I assume I might have seen or been with my buddy who played the flat version and might have told me about it. But I don't really remember how I exactly came up it. I imagine, well, I got it for $21, so it must have been a little bit on sale.
I mean, I bought it for Quest last week, and it was more than that. So yeah. much later, right? So, it was Christmas Day. I mean, the Quest came out in March of 2019 or May 2019, like early 2019, and it was a launch title for that. So, may have just had like a bit of a 10%, 20% off or something like that as well. So very, very good.
But yeah, and it was one of the games that I showed off to a lot of my friends that I met when I got VR. So, I was playing this on the Quest 1.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was same with me actually with the PSVR 1 title. Like that would be one of the titles. I mean, they had the PSVR 1 like Worlds disc, which was like a demo disc, which was always a good one to show people because it had and it had some random like experiences where you could just be seated and there'll be like a shark going around you and such. It was really cool actually at the moment. But this was definitely one of the games because it just showcased VR so well. It's like, this is what it is. It's so different to flat screen. No, exactly. It's very easy to put someone in, like they get it quickly, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how the game starts and such much later on. But Samson, before we get
we get the game mechanic quickly, but maybe not necessarily realizing
right
how meta.
To be fair, I probably would have given them the game when the headset's already on. So maybe that's why it wasn't big of an issue. All right, let's go in before we talk about the history. Where we'll start, where we go into basically what this game was like back in as early as 2013, to be honest, I believe so. But before we do that, let's start off with some quick fun facts. Samson, some quick fun facts, just to get just get us warmed up, get the audience warmed up as well. So we have 7 fun facts to say. The first one: SuperHot VR was inspired by a Flash game called Time for Cats. This was number 4, where a player controls a cat trying to catch food, where time only moves when the player moves. I'm not sure if you've tried this, Samson, but I tried this out, and it's actually a cool game. It's basically like you're in an intersection, and there's like 4 basically roads leading off that, and then you're the cat, but once again, just like SuperHot, it moves when you move the cat, and the cat's just like your cursor basically, and there's food all around. But then as you get more and more into the game, more people start to walk by, cars start to come over and such, so it gets really complicated,
like one of those like traffic games where it's
in a way in a way, but you're just on the stationary map and you're just going around. Like, it's really simple. It's just got that core mechanic. I've never heard of this game beforehand, but when I was doing my research for it, they said like a few things influenced them, of course, with like the style and such, but that was the mechanic influence was Time for Cat. So, if you have some chance later on in this podcast, definitely try it out. Time for Cat with the number 4, you'll find it as a Flash game. Samson, what's the next fun fact that we have?
Fact number 2 is the name SuperHot was derived from positive and intense.
Very good. Number 3, visuals. The black is for interactable objects, the red is for enemies, and the white is for the environment. Incredibly simplistic. And it was like this during their first early builds in the game jam, and we'll talk about that in a moment, since they wanted to just put all the emphasis on the actual gameplay itself. But what they noticed is it also helped users grasp the concepts very quickly. So when it came to the actual game, they didn't change it. It looks a bit more polished than the original like Flash version for sure, but they did not change the art style. They did not change the colors or anything like that. Did not add too much else to it. It's very much exactly how it was when they built the prototype, shall we say, which is very cool.
Fact number 4. Game is rebuilt from the ground up with new levels for VR since certain levels and movements didn't translate well from the flat screen version. It would cause motion sickness because they didn't want the player. I believe they tried it and they tested it
Yeah.
joystick, and it didn't feel very natural because the whole point of the game is to encompass the player and only move when you move.
Yeah, they said something like it broke the immersion and it was just not as impactful as it currently ended up being. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a big difference. I always forget that until I jump back into the flat screen. I'm like, oh, you can actually move around and all that stuff. But yeah, fact number 5, in the VR version, there were scenes that involved the player character committing self-harm, such as shooting themselves in the head or jumping off a tall building. These were patched out in 2021, which is so recent. Like, I honestly don't remember those at all when I played it in 2017, to be honest. I'm not sure if you can remember.
Dan, I remember it because much like not realizing I needed to put the VR headset on, I did not realize that I needed to shoot myself.
Right. Fair enough. I don't remember that for some reason. It's completely erased from my memory. But did you have to do that early on then?
Yeah, I believe it was how they end the game.
Oh, how they ended the game? Okay. That might be why I just can't remember it. I'm not sure if I properly finished it or anything. After you.
Number 6. It won Best VR Experience at IGN's 2017's Best of Awards, as well as Best VR AR at the Game Developers Choice Awards. And there are more awards too.
Yeah, it won quite a lot. And then finally, the last quick fun fact here is in April 2019, the SuperHot team reported that the sales of SuperHot VR had surpassed 800,000 units, exceeding the sales of the original SuperHot game. I remember April 2019, that's right around when the Quest 1 launched with it. It did come out on PC and such before that, but you know what? That's exactly what we're going to talk about next, Samson, because let's talk about the history. And I think the most important, not most important, but important part to know is that, you know, we can talk about the history of the game and we will get into that. But what was VR like during the time of when SuperHot kind of released? So SuperHot came out around like 2016, 2017. It came out in 2016, like February, for the flat screen, and at the end of December, it came out on the Oculus Rift, which was the exclusive that the Oculus had, but then it eventually came to everything else the year after. So 2016 and 2017, and Samson, I'm sure you probably...
before I was in VR.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So since you were like not in VR, can you remember like that time at all? Like, did you ever keep tabs on it? Because it was a big time for VR, that little 2016, 2017.
Well, Dan, I remember the 2016, 2017 era, but I do not remember it for SuperHot.
Yeah, fair enough.
Or as it pertains to VR.
Yeah, I guess I remember it well just because that's when I got the PSVR 1 was in 2017, so I was kind of in it a little bit in that kind of respect. To be fair, the PSVR 1 did have quite a lot of these big titles, obviously not as big as some of the PC VR ones, but did have some of these. But anyway, there was some great PC VR headsets in 2016, 2017. You've got the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive were like the two biggest ones at the time. And then, like I said, eventually the PlayStation VR 1 came out in 2017, which really brought like most of these titles over. So like Job Simulator came over, Arizona Sunshine. Eve Valkyrie was not on PSVR 1, but that was a massive game for VR headsets. So I know people, I know one person I used to work with, he had the whole VR rig. I think he had
just for
did
that.
He have the Steam rig or did he have the HTC? I don't remember which headset he had, but just for that, that's all he would play. He had everything. He'd have the what's the control stick for the for the spaceship games? Is a Hoff or something like that? Or
I use a Thrustmaster.
Yeah, it wasn't that. I can't remember what it's called, but he had the whole setup and such. But just for that, he didn't play anything. And then eventually, he played Star Wars Squadrons because obviously that kind of was
great game.
cut from the same cloth. But yeah, so Eve Valkyrie was absolutely huge. Lone Echo was obviously the big one for Oculus at the time. Star Trek Bridge Crew was actually massive. That actually did come to PSVR 1.
Good time.
Multiplayer itself. So there weren't like many games, but the games that were out on PC VR and PlayStation VR were pretty big. And it had a huge following, and from the outside it felt like it was very successful in its niche itself. And just for the listeners here, if you were kind of wondering, Meta purchased Oculus in 2014. So this was 2 years before this little VR boom, shall we have. And then we had another boom later on, obviously with the Quest 2 and such. But yeah, that was kind of the era at the time. Okay. And then enter SuperHot VR. So let's talk about the timeline of SuperHot VR, how it actually came to fruition. And I just want to reiterate again, this is not a VR game first. It was a flat screen game. It feels like it's a natural VR game, but it isn't. So a bit of timeline, Samson. Let's start off with August 2013. Let's go all the way back to that.
Whoa.
I was just finishing high school around that time. I was just about to go into university a year later.
I was post university.
Very, very good. So in August 2013, it was a hobby project amongst a few friends, and it was during like a 7-day game jam. It was a first-person shooter, in particular game jam. That's where they kind of showed it off, and it was a 3-level prototype that could be played in the browser, and it gained mass attention. Samson, did you ever play the Flash version of the SuperHot?
I apparently was not on the cool part of the internet in 2013.
I definitely never played it until like 2 days ago. To be honest, Edward from Mighty Coconut messaged me on Twitter to ask me if I had played it yet for obviously the show. And I did, for some reason, I did all this research and I didn't think to Google if it was still available. And yeah, you can definitely play it, and it feels in a way very similar to the actual game. You could tell it's obviously a like a beta test in a way, a prototype, right? But it still does feel like SuperHot, and it is basically SuperHot. And yeah, so you can still definitely play that. I did have some browser issues, but it still works.
Which Chrome?
No, I was on Safari. That's probably the why. Yeah, that's probably why. Samson, was there a quote that you wanted to speak about this?
Yeah, there is a quote, Dan, from I believe
Good luck.
Well, it's a Polish name, Dan. It's quite challenging. The game director, I want to say Peter, but I know it's Peter, I believe. Iwanaki.
Nice. Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah, almost. Anyway, he says, "You have nothing to lose. So when we began SuperHot as this bigger thing, one of our first decisions was to not play it safe. Don't make it like a normal game. Make it like an edgy, strange game jam project. It was about adventure, not just rational choices."
Yeah. This is straight from their like kind of quote in the game industry biz itself. So that's where it started off. Yeah, in the little game jam itself. And then a month later, they basically had to go through like crowdfunding and trying to get noted. So back then in 2013, you couldn't publish a game directly to the Steam library, like unlike now where anyone can publish anything and such like that. You couldn't do that. So for indie, it was more of a curated list, and for indie titles, they had to go through Steam's Greenlight service, which was a thing back then that no longer exists, where indie devs submit their game to and then community voters vote on what they want to be published. And it was the fastest game ever to be greenlit as well.
That's crazy.
Yeah, different time. Do you remember any of this stuff? Like,
no, I was a PC gamer. No,
this is before your time, Samson. Before your time.
I was a silly console guy.
I mean, I always stayed as a silly console guy, to be honest with you.
I also have my PlayStation 5.
You know, my Steam Deck's the closest I ever get to a PC, to be honest. But yeah, but here's the interesting thing when I was doing the research about this is that during this time, so September 2013, this is only a month after it's just been shown at the Game Jam, the Oculus SDK was available, and they were testing a VR version of the game as early as that.
That's crazy.
Right, that is crazy, and that kind of makes me understand. Going, oh, okay, this is why we think this game's kind of built for the ground up in VR. Not like
it was.
They kind of had it in their mind, right? They kind of had it in their mind. It was still 3 years later until the VR version came out, but it was in the back of their mind.
Yeah, it's crazy that it takes like an indie dev to really think outside the box and have the cojones to take chances like this. This is clearly not something that like a real AAA big developer was willing to take a risk at, like this totally unique type of movement and VR also eventually, but just an incredible job. I love it. It feels so special, man. And it's crazy that they just how quickly they came up with it. And
yeah. It's also one shout out to just Flash games in general. Like we all played them as kids in school computers or so, and there are so many good ones, or like games that just had really good mechanics to it, and you can see in future games, like especially games on the mobile now, that have like taken from the mechanics and put a nicer coat and paint on it and such, and have probably sold, like made millions or thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars just on what like certain Flash games, how the popular ones were. Shout out to Flash games, because that was a great time. That was just a great time, right? And so, anyway, so fast forward now to May 2014. They put the game on Kickstarter and funded it within 24 hours, which was $230,000, which they funded it, which is crazy. So that was super quick. Obviously, the green light was super quick on Steam.
Have you supported a game on Kickstarter?
No, never. No, I don't think I've ever done a Kickstarter, to be honest. I think I've got close once and such, but I wonder
what the rewards were for this one. I didn't go back and check, but I did support All on Board.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I'm not sure what the awards were, but the game didn't come out until 2 years later, after they got the funding. In February 2016, the flat screen version came out for consoles and the PC. But we're not really interested in that. We'll talk a bit about that one later, but we're more interested in the VR version. That came out, as mentioned earlier, in December 2016 as an Oculus Rift exclusive, since Oculus, or like the Meta, Oculus division at that point, funded the game to come to VR. And with the agreement of that it will have like a timed exclusive. But as mentioned, it got ported over to PC and PSVR 1 the following year. And then it was also a launch title for Oculus Quest 1, which is where you played it. And you kind of mentioned this already in terms of your memories, but I just had a quick look at the Oculus One launch titles, and there was lots of launch titles, don't get me wrong, but for you to name, like Beat Saber, Robo Recall, which was another massive one for the PC at the time, Moss, Creed Rise to Glory, Vader Immortal, The Climb. Like, I feel like we could feature most of those games on this show, right?
We could do a whole launch lineup, Quest 1 launch lineup.
Yeah, exactly. It might do, because they're still, like, most of those games are still stellar. Robo Recall is probably the odd one out that doesn't get talked about much anymore. But I think because the PC version was so like amazing and a big following, and I think the Quest version just didn't deliver on it, from what I remember. But we will cover it one day, because I feel like we'd
be more inclined to play The Climb 2 at this point.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we've got to see where it all began. But yeah, incredible launch lineup. Incredible. Just a top tier of games. Like you match that with any other flat screen console and such, and it's probably right up there. Samson, do you want to read what the PC Mag reviewed SuperHot VR? What their little like blurb was?
I'd love to read the blurb from PC Mag review. It's a game that keeps you invested in its world, thanks to controls that give immediate, satisfying, and visceral feedback. SuperHot VR is an excellent virtual reality experience that can't be replicated on conventional platforms. So, if you own an Oculus Rift or are thinking of buying one, this is your game. 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. I'd give it a 5 out of 5, to be honest. And then, as mentioned earlier, the VR version did outsell the flat version very, very quickly, to be honest with you. So
crazy.
Very, very interesting history. Really cool history to see how it all began and such. And, just a few guys just putting it together for a game jam, and that's all it was. And they had such a great mechanic, and obviously a good premise as well. It wasn't just the mechanic, even though that was obviously biggest part of it. And they just hit the ground running with all the crowdfunding and such, all the hype behind the game. Like it was massive.
It's like everybody knew it's what they wanted and that how cool it would be.
Yeah.
And it delivered exactly on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of why I wanted this one to be our first game to talk about, because it's when every time I think about early VR, for some reason, SuperHot is the first game that comes to mind every single time. And I think it's just maybe it was just from my own personal experience, but it's just how amazing it was. And it was such a great game at the time. And, all that hype as well was probably more for the flat screen version, because the crowdfunding was for the flat screen version. Exactly, right? It's exactly that's how crazy it is. So all right, we've talked about the history and our memories and such, but for those of you who are listening to this and may have not played this game before, or maybe you still haven't played it, which is there's understandable. There's a lot of games, people new to VR, maybe you never came across this one and such, but you definitely should play. It's a definitely must play. Let's talk about the gameplay a little bit first. Okay, so first of all, Sam, so how would you describe the gameplay? How would you describe that gameplay?
The gameplay?
Yeah, how would you describe the mechanic and such?
Well, the mechanic is when you move, time moves. So there are enemies. Some of them have weapons, and you need to look around, see what weapons you have at hand, or if any. Sometimes you don't have any. And then slowly move, or quickly move if you want to, really think fast.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly work your way through each red enemy, through either punching them and they'll break, or grab their weapon, use one of your weapons, throw one of your weapons.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because they will live react. And there was one time where there were 3 enemies right next to one another, and I kept failing eventually. So I did this part several times, and I tried killing one on the left. First I killed the middle one, I killed one on the left, then the one on the right would look to the left after I killed him. And same vice versa. If I killed the one on the right, then the left one would look. So
that's cool.
It was always set to be if the last 2 enemies, they'll look at whoever's who just died.
That's cool.
I thought that was really cool.
I've never noticed that, to be honest, but I guess it's just one of those little neat touches that add to the feeling of the game.
Yeah.
It's a really special mechanic because it's not done often. Like there are a few games nowadays that have done something similar, and we'll talk about that in part 3. But there's still very rare of like someone's done this kind of mechanic, and it's simple. It's just like you said, the time only progresses when you move. But it's not even just the fact that like if you do not move anything, like nothing changes. Like I think of a game,
you can
like,
move your eyes around.
You can move your eyes around. Yeah, there's no eye tracking.
Imagine super hot, yeah, with eye tracking, and time moves when you move your eyes. Too.
That'd be tough. That'd be very tough, to be honest. Yeah, it's so cool in that it kind of makes you feel like you're, I don't know, like the Flash or something, or like doing bullet time in Max Payne or something like that. But here's the thing: like a game like Action Hero, which is very similar, obviously just came out at the end of last year. That still moves even if you don't move at all. Like it still moves, it just goes really slow and such. But this is like, if you literally just try and just move your eyes and realize you're in the wrong position and you have no idea if someone's behind you or not, it's kind of fun. It's really
another
fun.
thing, Dan, is it doesn't use any of the buttons or the joysticks, only the grip button and the trigger. So I kind of want a super hot where you shoot different types of bullets, maybe, and you use the face buttons to make them react, like explode or do something else.
Yeah.
Throughout time, I feel like there are more ways that they can further these mechanics, like go a bit deeper. But they do nail it in this one.
Well, you can put a lot of flair into the levels. Like you can try and complete them as fast as possible, which I'm not going to lie, when I do get stuck, I end up trying to do it faster, and that makes it even harder every single time.
Yeah.
But you can do some like outrageous trick shots and stunts, and it's only possible in this type of game. Like I remember when I could pick up like an ashtray and block the bullet with the ashtray, and then
I got an achievement for slicing bullets.
Slice? Oh, cool. I didn't do that. I haven't done the slice. That is pretty cool. Yeah, the achievements are cool, but it's just a very addictive gameplay loop, and it wants to make you keep coming in and going. And obviously that kind of leads to the lore of the game, which we'll talk about in the next part. But and then when you do beat the game, you do get like this endless mode, so you can try and play it for so many different levels on a loop and a loop and loop. And you get the mode where you also can't die, which I feel like is very, very difficult to do, to be honest. There's like a couple of floppy disks when you do. I just want to round off, though. We'll talk more about this gameplay in part 2 when we talk about how it plays today. But I just want to quickly talk about the differences from the flat screen version, if anyone's interested. The biggest difference is the ability that you get midway through the game. So in the VR version, you get the mind wave ability, which allows you to telepathically kill an enemy when unarmed. And you basically like hold the triggers pointing your like fists at certain enemy, and then it will like flash like a white kind of line to it. And then it does take a little bit of time, and then eventually the enemy kind of dies, but then it takes a while to reload. So really you could probably just get one in for a specific level. But in the flat screen version, it doesn't have that. It has a hot switch ability, which allows you to take place of an enemy's position. So you can just switch, which is obviously very different because you are traversing in the flat screen version. So
that one's kind of like that other VR game, Dan. What's that? I forget what it's called.
The Mannequin. Is that the one you're talking about?
There was a game that's kind of like the super hot mechanic.
Yeah.
Where when you kill an enemy, you go towards them and you take their weapon, and that's how you sort of progress through the through the map.
Yeah. So I feel like that they did switch that out due to, once again, they didn't want the movement to happen. But like now, after in like 2025, I feel like they may have been able to do the hot switch absolutely fine, to be honest. But alas, back in 2016, they didn't really want that. So there are secrets in both games. In the VR version, there's floppy disks which don't do anything. Did you find any floppy disks?
Not that I mean, I feel like at the end I just have a normal amount of floppy disks, which are
the ones at the end. Yeah. No. So these floppy disks are. So I had to look this up because I was never ever going to find them. You have to, like, let's say if there's, I don't know, like a wall in front of you, you have to put your head through the wall, and maybe there's a floppy disk there. And like on almost every single level, you have to go through the geometry. And some of the levels like are really difficult.
Damn, I should find it then.
Yeah, you had like some of the levels are really difficult where it, like towards the end, you grab the pyramid and such, but before you grab it, you could probably stick your head through walls as such just to double check and then find the floppy disk. But not every little section of the level has that, right? So you got to find the floppy disk first in a way, and then do all your shooting and such and kind of get to the game. But essentially what I've seen, unless I'm wrong here, and obviously let us know if we've said anything incorrect in the comments and such, but the floppy disks don't do anything. It's just for an achievement, basically. So you grab them and they just kind of disappear, where the flat screen version has a really cool secret. So they have these terminals, and there's 27 of them, where you find them by walking around the map. So you can walk around the map and you'll find these basically computers, and you could go through the terminals, and each terminal has adds to the lore of the game. Like there's a specific hidden message and such. And if you went online, you could probably bring up the terminals and read them and such like that if you really wanted to. But really cool. And it's really sad that the floppy disk secret in VR doesn't actually do anything. It would be fun if each one of those floppy disks, you can bring it back to the... Yeah, but it'd be cool if you could bring that back into your little hub and put that floppy disk in, and it maybe reads the same message that had on the terminal, just for that. They could have done that.
Well, Dan,
alas.
In the flat version, you can rewatch yourself play the level in real time, I believe. That would be a really cool thing if in the VR, when you got back to the hub, you watched that level on the screen or something like that.
Yeah. That'll be cool too.
By the way, Dan, the game that I was thinking of was called Vendetta Forever.
Yeah, I haven't played that yet. That is on the list. That came out at the end of last year. That is on the list. But yeah, so that will do for part one, where we went through the history. In part two, what we'll do is we'll go into how it plays today and tell you about our thoughts when we played the game as well, going into the lore of the game, because it is very, very interesting, shall we say. So we'll see you in part two.
Hey, we know public lobbies in VR games can be a bit toxic, feel a bit empty at times. That's why we created the Let's Talk Oculus Discord, a friendly community that you can join for multiplayer meetups, general VR chat, the game, and chat about VR, fitness motivation, and there's even a very impressive 3D printing channel. Join over 100 of our community members in the Let's Talk Oculus Discord for free. The link is right in the description.
All right, welcome back to part two of the SuperHot VR Revisited episode. Let's talk about how it plays today in 2025. As mentioned, Samson, I never had this game on Quest, as I realized, and I had it on PSVR 1, which means I also haven't played this game properly since 2017. So I have actually forgotten, wow. I obviously knew the game. Obviously, I played it on the flat screen as well, and I was very, very familiar with it. But I'd forgotten all of the menu system or any of that outside stuff. I just remember the actual game itself. So let's talk about the tutorial and start first, because it's actually an amazing introduction to the game. So when you start the game, you're essentially straight into a terminal, immediately. As soon as I pressed it on the Quest, I thought it would be a black loading screen, but the terminal came in, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of screens that appear, and then you get sucked in to that level immediately. So it was super immersive and really cool, because we've talked about this on the show quite a few times, where there are a lot of games out there that don't really do a great job when it comes to their menu system. They just go to a standard flat screen, and such, and it's easy it works, right?
And now they can do it I like Cubism. It boots in mixed reality. I do like that for the mixed reality games.
I agree.
But yeah, I agree that their splat, what do they call it? The splash screen?
Yeah.
Their splash screen is part of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They did so well in 2016 that they added this, and so you get sucked in immediately, and it doesn't take you to the room with the monitors and such. It takes you straight into the tutorial. And to me, I think this is very, very Mario style. And what I mean by that is when you play a game like Super Mario Land or so, like back in the NES, SNES, Game Boy, those kind of days, there's no tutorial. You just it's just intuitive that you just start walking right and start jumping and hitting the question blocks and jumping over. Like, it's just, there's no tutorial in that game. And that's exactly what SuperHot is. Like, there is a bit of a like one word potentially, but it's just more like obvious. Like, it's just intuitive. Like, you look around and there's like an object, or there is a gun or something like that, and you just think to pick it up with the grip button and potentially shoot it with the trigger, and that's all you need to know as well. And it's very intuitive.
As long as you don't stay perfectly still, something will happen.
Yeah, exactly. Or you see the red person and you're just there in fear, so you're just like frozen. and unfrozen. But yeah, it was I thought it was a really cool tutorial to kind of get you in, and then obviously moving on from the tutorial finally into the menu. And I totally forgot about how the menu looked like, where you're in your tiny room, and there's monitors everywhere, and there's post-it notes everywhere, and at some stage as well there's like a podcast playing in the background and such, and there's just a door on the right, and that's all it is. And first of all, you're thinking, if you are playing in VR in this room, you can't move. You're not playing SuperHot in this game. It's very difficult. But yeah, it was very Ready Player One to me, is what I felt like. Like, it felt like that kind of scene itself. What do you think about the like menu system and such?
Well, just a little bit before
not knowing how to put the headset on.
yeah. Before that, I do really like how the game scales from the one enemy to two enemies, and introducing the guns very slowly. There's only 3 guns. There's no ammo, right? You just have to. Right. All the guns always have the same amount of ammo, so you can kind of keep track, but there's no like ammo counter, and it's very intuitive to the game mechanics. As far as the menu system, I do like the floppies, like how those all work, and it feels very nostalgic for me, right? I used to have floppies, Dan, and use them on the family computer.
I used to have. Well, I didn't actually own my own floppies, but I still remember. I remember the cube box that my dad had, which was like plastic, and you'd open them, and there'd be like a tray of floppies in there. Yeah. But they were never in like a sleeve for some reason. They were always in this like metal box.
I imagine some of them had some of my 3rd grade or 4th grade papers on them and whatnot. Papers, if you will, or my internet research at the time. So it just makes sense in the universe, right? So it's like meta. It's everything fits all into this world, and it tells so much of a story without like telling you the story, right? There's no cutscenes type of deal. And so the menu system is
intuitive,
dare I say perfect.
It is a perfect menu system. It because it plays to the story as well. It plays to the lore. It adds to it big time. As soon as you press the SuperHot, as soon as you turn the game on, like as soon as you press the game on your Quest, from that moment you're straight in immersed from that very
playing.
Whether you're in the menu system, whether you're in a tutorial, whether you're just watching like the loading screen before the game actually begins, you're immersed all the way up until you turn that game off, all the way. And it's so impressive that they've done this. And there's not many games that do this anymore, which is a real shame because there's so much potential. But obviously, more time and effort spent on the actual game itself. But yeah, it's really cool. By the way, the podcast and radio show that was playing in the background, it's on. I think once there's a specific level in there. I think it's like after the second main story beat or the second main floppy disk. The helicopter, the helicopter crashes or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's like a podcast or something that happens. I was trying to Google it. I was going on Reddit because I was listening to it for a little bit, and it was like very philosophical. I can't say that word. You know what I'm saying?
Philosophical.
Philosophical. That's it. podcast playing, or like obviously not podcast, if like a radio show, and it reminded me a lot of the Witness. The Witness puzzle game has a lot of like dialogue like that. But I was trying to look online to try and find what it was, and even people posted it on Reddit to try and ask what it was, but no one had a clue. So I just simply asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT seemed to think it's gibberish, and it just is there to play into the game's atmosphere. So
There you go.
it's probably just made up for it. But yeah, so then you had obviously issues with the VR headset dangling down, as you talked about, and then you put it
Only
on.
originally. Once you figure that out, you get it.
Yeah, you're just fine. I think this is a good time to kind of go on a little bit of a tangent here and talk about the actual lore and the story of the game before we go back to our like gameplay of it, because there is multiple theories about what this game is actually about. It's very cryptic. There are very, like, in terms of seeing, you see words and such on post-it notes, and you see the odd word that gets flashed on the screen and such, but it's very cryptic. You don't really know what's going on and such. And there are many theories out there, but they all stem from maybe two main theories themselves. So
Feels like an episode of Lost, Dan.
yeah, I guess so, but it wasn't all a dream. But I guess I just spoiled Lost for a lot of people who have never seen it before, so I apologize.
Yeah, I've never actually seen it. I just talk about it like that because I know I'm up on pop culture.
Yeah, fair enough. It was a long time ago. Stas, do you want to read what the first, like, this is I would say the main story is what people are theorizing, because we found this on Reddit. So do you want to read the first like theory, shall we say?
I'd love to. From Stock
Z on Reddit.
Stockisl.
Sure. He posted this 9 years ago, so I don't think it matters, but yeah.
The system captures you and forces you to separate from your body by, quote, killing yourself in the VR chair, allowing your mind to eventually integrate with the system. Once your mind is integrated into the system, you no longer have free will, and your thoughts are to promote SuperHot. The game messes with your head all throughout by doing stuff like forcing you to say, I just want to get back into the game, in the middle of a bunch of boring dialogue, right as you're thinking, I just want to keep playing in real life. The idea is that you're in real life are part of a system now and don't even realize it.
You're institutionalized, basically, is what it's trying to say.
Yeah.
I think that's the main theory that a lot of people are saying is what the game is the story and what the lore is and what it's about. Do you have any thoughts on that, or do you align with that one in terms of
Dan,
what you think?
I don't particularly care about the story for this one. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm here for the puzzles and the game mechanic itself. I don't really care why I'm here. In fact, not caring about the story is probably why I didn't realize to put on my VR headset
right
initially.
Right. You're like, I don't know what's going on.
That's how quickly I was like, just let me get into this and figure it out what's going on.
That's very well.
So yeah, this one sounds great. It sounds plausible. I'm sold. Are you sold?
So this theory is what I aligned on, to be honest. I don't think I could have put it as eloquently as Stockisl, but I think this is kind of how I was feeling when I did. Obviously, I couldn't complete it. I got very close, but when I looked online, what happens is it's obviously spoilers for all the SuperHot. I'm sure you'll know this by now, but the pyramid the black pyramid that you grab to leave, basically, eventually your door opens to the right of you, and then that pyramid is there and it comes towards you. So it's like now you are basically a part of the game as well. It's such. So yeah, I was definitely more aligned with that, but the alternate take is actually really interesting too. A lot of people thought the alternate take could be the one, so it's a bit opposite to the first theory. So The alternate take from Caesar, I would say, from Reddit, also
I'd say that too.
9+ years ago. They say, what if the system is actually freeing you? You, the player, have become so immersed in its world, the system tried to get you to turn back. It stopped you from stopped you from talking to your friend that you got addicted. It tried to slowly warn you that you needed to leave. It even stopped you from playing. You were the problem. You were immersed in this alternative world. The system saw there was no going back, and you needed more. The system gave you one last set of missions. It kept rejecting you to try and get you to stop. It wanted those missions to be hard and stop someone who was truly addicted from closing their life away. The system knew you were too addicted. You would never turn back to your real life. You would always just want more, so it saved you. It allowed you to move your mind into its core and leave your body so you won't die from what it created. One of us post-its, so when you complete the game, all the post-its change to one of us. On the wall, when you complete the game, are all people too addicted to leave. You didn't beat the game beat you. And the system merely saved you from your own slow, painful, I guess, suicide in the original until it got rid of that in 2021. I just like listening to these fan theories and such. Like, I really, in a way, just want to hear from the actual developers. And they were probably like, you know what, we just wanted to create an eerie world, and that was pretty much it. You know, it's like one of those, like, the songs. I remember Kurt Cobain said something about this.
More into it.
Yeah, it said something about, like, one of his songs, like, what does this mean? What does it mean? He's like, you know what? These words just sound good when they're put together. That's all it is. Everyone's got all these, like, theories, and it's just like, yeah, the words just sounded good. That's all. There's nothing deep about it, and that could be it. But it's fun. It's fun to hear the series, and I want to hear from the audience as well. Like, if you got deep into the lore of SuperHot, or if you're like more like Samson, who's like, I just wanted to play these puzzles and have a good time, and that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
I do go with the first one.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Samson, let's get back to the game experience. I think I'm not gonna lie, after playing a lot of Action Hero recently, the SuperHot felt very slow to me, and I think it's because, like, it literally does not move unless you do move. Where Action Hero, it does still move a little bit and such, so it felt very slow at the start, and you know, it felt like this is a bit of a dated game at the very start.
Too easy.
Yeah, it felt very easy. Obviously, less creative than what Action Hero has now and such like that. And like I mentioned, it was slow, but it was only really until I got like maybe 35% to 50% of the game when the Mind Wave ability came in. That's when it goes, okay, now we're going to step it up a notch. Now you know how to play the game. Here's an extra ability, and it really makes you think on how to use it, basically, like how best to use it. Sometimes you might not need to use it, and it's actually detrimental if you do try and use it. And then sometimes you use it on the wrong enemy, or the amount of times that I picked up a gun and tried to use it and realized that you needed to use it unarmed was always a pain. But then it just got more complicated. Like the NPCs were moving more, so they'd move backwards and they'll move left, move right. It was hard to predict their movements. So when you shoot, you have to like shoot to open space, hoping that they're eventually going to walk into that kind of area and such. It's
you gotta aim.
You got to aim, right? And it's so much trial and error in that second half, and that's when it really shined for me. But before we go on further, how good was your aim with the discs? Because I could not hit a barn door with them. The discs were just lost on me.
Yeah, I was pretty good with the throwing. I'd say I felt good about 85% of my throws. Like, where 15% of them, I was like, that probably was not my fault for I missed. I did not say that I hit them 85% of the time, but 85% of the time, I felt if I missed, it was my fault.
Yeah,
but I was throwing with more of like a push as opposed to throwing like a baseball or a football. Mm-hmm. So it was more just like release.
I think that was it, just like a dart in a way. Like you just push it away and then just let the gravity hit it.
But Dan, it feels good when you throw things, especially when I would lead with because you mentioned with the bullets having to lead, but when you lead with a throw,
Oh, so satisfying. Yeah. There's one specific level. There's a lot of good levels in this game, but there's one specific one where you're in an elevator and the elevator is like half open and there's just nothing but discs on the wall. And there's 3 enemies, but you don't know there's 3 enemies because only the one that you look at shoots at you. So then if you keep turning your head, you'll see that there's another one and there's another one. The last one actually just come moving towards you, but the last one also has a shotgun. And I was stuck on that one. That was actually like just before halfway, so it was before the mind wave ability. But I was stuck on that one for so long because I just couldn't get the throw right you're right, you have to just kind of like push it and guide it instead of actually try and throw it. Because if I try and throw it, just forget about it.
I also felt like if I pulled back to throw how I would normally throw, I'm wasting a lot of movement. And time.
Yeah, you're right. So, what did you think of the mind wave mechanic when it did get
So when the game first teaches you the mind wave mechanic, I did the whatever tutorial, and I think I just punched the enemy and didn't use the mind wave mechanic to kill
those
the enemy.
three enemies that come towards you, and you could easily just punch them if you didn't really need to use it. But
exactly. But then immediately or very quickly, you're faced with 2 enemies up top who are shooting at you with unlimited ammo. And so you have to use it to get by them. This took me far too long, once again, to realize that I needed to use this mechanic. And then I used it on them and really didn't use it again once.
No, you didn't. Fair enough.
I had gone through the whole game without using it. So I was just like, it's not in my head to use it then. This is why I suck at like Batman and such. I forget to use all the gadgets, right? Yeah. So this one, I'm just like, oh, this is how I play it. So this is how I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And so I played through the rest of the game pretty much without. I might have used it once, but I don't really. I'm pretty certain every time I beat each level, I did not use it.
I think the idea, right, is when. You're right. When I remember there being like 2 or 3 enemies, but then there'll be one up high, and maybe the one up high is coming down with a shotgun, and so it's like really hard to dodge shotgun bullets because there's like 25 bullets that come out of that shotgun at once.
Okay, Dan. I think this is now where I need to talk about a little bit of my. I cheesed it a little bit. I feel because I had a solid 15 by 15, maybe 20 by 20 play space. And
massive.
And so there was particularly the last level, I believe, where they're coming at waves from the sides and they're meant to come at you where you can't see where they spawn and then they come around the corner. I just walked forward so I could see them and I was right next to them. And so as they spawned, I just immediately shot them. And so this game,
you were outside, right? You were outside.
I was outside.
Yeah.
I feel like this game does get significantly easier the more space you have.
I think
you still do have to like dodge, right? You still have to.
If you move forward, it's going to move, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I struggled. I'm not in. I think maybe I'm just 2 meters by 2 meters, if not just barely that. I'm
so you're having to duck a lot.
Yeah, I'm in a den where it's a bit weird. Where like I think it's like an 8 by 10 meter den because of the furniture in certain places. I think, sometimes I got really close to my bookshelf and such, and because I had the cover which I could see outside, it was actually fine. But yeah, there was an amount of times, and plus every time I it goes to the next level, it resets me in like almost the wrong place sometimes, just because.
So that would mess with me as well. Sometimes I would spawn the level in a much different spot than it really wanted me to, but most of the time it kind of helped.
Yeah. So it's one of those. I did notice that though. There was one level, I can't remember which one, but basically there were like hidden NPCs behind walls, but because I just caught them and I was in an area of my room, I could just walk next to it. It was very easy to kill, where I feel like if I was in the actual character's room that's in the actual game, very difficult to kind of get around and such. But Yeah, you're right. The bigger the play space, the a little bit easier it is, but only a little bit. Like you said, like you still got to do a lot more, but it does help to maybe walk a little bit if you can, for sure. But yeah, the mind wave. Just going back to that real quick. I got it in the end in terms of like the whole idea is that you need to try and get the one that is at the most like danger to you. Not like it necessarily to be the one that's closest to you or has like a pistol, but like if one specific NPC is causing you issues with, especially it's the ones with the guns, like the shotgun or the machine gun. They're the ones that you try and like wipe out first, so then you could take care of the other ones. But also sometimes I've noticed once, this is very early on in the Mindwave one, where there was 3 enemies and you're looking down on them, and I realized that you want to get the one far away, even though they all 3 of them have got like similar guns. The one far away, if you get it, that one's very difficult to hit because he's going up and down, up and down, up and down. So if you try and get him, the other 2 kind of stay in their own little space. So then it's very easy to kill those
choosing,
2.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all about that, and it's trial and error, right? It's trial and error. But yeah, do you have any other thoughts on the game?
On the game, I've got some overall thoughts on the game.
Yeah, hit him.
say overall SuperHot still holds up quite well, not only as an excellent VR title, but as a fantastic first VR experience. For most, I wouldn't put my mom in it, but I put most of my friends in it. It's very short, it's sweet, but it offers a bit more juice to squeeze out of it for those who seek it, with the endless mode and the time trial mode and a few other, at least one other mode, I forget. I do wish there'd be some sort of update now to add in some sort of mixed reality mode. I'm a sucker for that. I don't know how exactly it would work. And like I said, I do feel like I know that they released some sort of sequel of another game.
They did Mind Control Delete, which was like a bunch of extra levels and such, but it never made its way to VR or anything.
I would love more. I feel like what they're doing now is helping other indie games.
They are, yeah.
They're helping.
They have like a foundation or so and such, and that's what they're doing.
But I do want myself some more SuperHot.
Yeah, it's weird because the game's kind of like disappeared now in terms of like the studio and such. Like, it's still, obviously the game's still there, but in terms of like further support and such, like it's just there's nothing to it anymore. Which it's always been very weird that there wasn't a SuperHot VR 2 at all.
Is there Steam Workshop, Dan, for the PC version, where there's like player custom levels? I'm not sure about that.
Know. Yeah, I don't know.
But that could be a great thing.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that, but yeah, I'm very, very surprised. It sold so well, and it's still regarded as one of the like must plays on VR. And I'm so surprised it never came out with a second version. They could have expanded it big time. They would have probably got a lot of funding
DLC.
from. Yeah, they could have just done DLC. Or I'm thinking, this game reminds me a lot of like Portal in a way, and what I mean by that is that it's just got a super cool mechanic. It started out like a bit of a tech demo and such, and with what Valve did, they obviously created Portal 2 and made it into a proper story game and such. And I think they could have gone that route with this. Like, they could have expanded the lore and really gone like straight into it, like really expanded. Like right now it's just levels really, and it has a bit of like a backstory that people can think about different theories, but they could have really taken a Portal 2 approach with the second game and really like made it into like, okay, you now have the SuperHot levels as you do maybe at the start, but then maybe introduced another type of mechanic, or maybe introduced a completely new different type of setting or so. There's many different ways. Maybe actually have a proper story that's even embedded and such, like Ready Player One style in a way. Like, it could give me that kind of vibe. So I think they could have really gone that way, but they obviously, small team, they chose not to. They're doing what they're doing now with the foundations and such, and that's absolutely fine. But I feel like even if they wanted to be like, hey, Meta, should we do a SuperHot 2? I think they would they would bite at that, to be honest. The meta is what would bite at that, is what I'm trying to say. My overall quick thoughts here before we wrap this part up. Phenomenal puzzle game, as we've said. The eeriness and dystopian fits perfect with VR. I would say the first half maybe feels a little bit slow and dated compared to like modern kind of releases, but the second half is a real challenge. And I think once you get past the first maybe 25-30% of the game, it gets really challenging. Well, not really challenging, but really, really good and really fun to play, and does offer a good challenge.
Yeah. The game scales up very well with
it
you.
Does.
So you kind of get better at it.
It's good pacing.
And exactly. So you don't realize how good you are. Like you said, when you went back to the start, it felt so easy.
Yeah.
Because when you go back after you've played it, exactly.
Yeah. I think if you want a modern day version, Action Hero is that modern day version. But the aesthetic and lore of this game makes it a must play. And that's the part that's really special about it as well. And the only thing I'd wish is that it had secrets like the flat screen one as well. That would be really cool. But anyway, that's a very small thing. That'll do for part 2. In part 3, we'll wrap this podcast up, which will talk about the influences that this game has had on the VR industry that you can see today. So we'll see you then.
Let's Talk Oculus is available on all good podcast platforms and some rubbish ones as well. If you want to see the video version, it's available on YouTube and Spotify. And also, if you love us so much, then consider throwing us $1 at patreon.com/letstalkoculus. Back to the show.
All right, welcome back to part 3, the final part of SuperHot VR Revisited. Let's talk about the influences, because it's had a lot of influences on the VR industry today. Samson, direct.
You've talked about one quite a few times.
Action Hero. I love Action Hero. That's why. Let's talk about direct influences first. The ones that you could obviously see the obvious similarities. It's funny because the 3 I found, and I'm not sure if you have any other options here, Samson, but Action Hero, V for Vendetta, and Cold VR, which all came out within the last few months. From the last half of the year up until now. Cold VR just came out recently.
It's right? Vendetta Forever, not.
Oh, it's not V for Vendetta. That's the
that's
the
movie.
That's the movie. Vendetta Forever. Sorry. They're the 3 games that are like very similar in its mechanics, with slight differences. Like I said, Action Hero it still plays a little bit. Vendetta Forever is a little bit different in terms of the. I think it's more reverse. And you teleport to the enemy you've killed, and then Cold VR is like complete reverse SuperHot.
Yeah, that was reverse. I never played that one.
I don't think that did well. It came out this year, but I'm not sure if it did that well. But it's very surprising that not many other games have copied the SuperHot formula. Can you think of any other direct ones?
I can't, but I think it's in part because SuperHot did so well that they've sort of, it's like The Sims, you know? The Sims crushed it, and I know there's that new one that just come out, but it's been like 25 to 30 years of Sims dominance or something like this.
I guess like Portal as well, where like there's not other games that have like a Portal mechanic and such. Few recently, but nothing like what it was.
Yeah, it's just like when a game comes and just nails a certain thing so well, it sort of stifles competition, because any game that came out and just does right, this is basically just this mechanic, right? Like I know there's lore, but you've got to go deeper, and you've got to sort of make it your own in some way, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, you're right, and that's only why we've probably only got the games out now that we mentioned,
and also because if you come out, Dan, and you're not successful, people are just going to be like, just play SuperHot.
Right. And then your game's tanked.
If you're not, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That might be the case for Cold VR, to be honest with you. Okay, indirect influences, though. A little bit more to talk about on that, because you could... There's so many indirect influences. I actually didn't write this one on the script, but I thought about this one earlier today. I feel like the last 3 days, all I've been thinking about is SuperHot, to be honest, preparing for this pod.
Hot.
It's so good. So good. I need to get that clipped up, put it in. I think Pistol Whip has a bit of an influence on this. Superhot's had an influence on Pistol Whip, to be honest, like very indirectly. But I think with the kind of the
Does feel
shooting
that way.
mechanics, yeah,
The dodging of
and
the bullets.
exactly like that. That's what I kind of got the feel for, to be honest with you. But I think the biggest direct influence, biggest indirect influence that I can see is just the emphasis on immersion in VR. I think it allows you to, VR allows you to see and feel things that you can't do in any other medium, and this game just absolutely nailed it. And it's one of those few games that has a flat screen version, but the VR version is so much better, and it feels like that's the way to play the game. Maybe I'm biased on that because that's when I played it first, but
It offers you truly encapsulate it. It's very, very immersive. You feel like you are this character moving around, even though only your hands and head are tracked. It
Right.
feels like everything is tracked, more so than a lot of games.
I actually heard that on there was, I think the game director that you mentioned, actually, he said that the one of the makers of the game, he got so immersed in it that he actually almost kicked his monitor down because he was trying to kick one of the NPCs, but didn't realize it wasn't tracked. Which is amazing. It's there was a really good quote in the podcast. I forget what it's called, Samson, that you sent me.
It was the Kent By podcast.
Yeah.
Voices of VR.
Voices of VR. That's it. He did a podcast. It's like episode 468 or so. It came out like when SuperHot VR came out, and they mentioned in there how like the way the game is set up, because it's so minimalistic, it's your mind is actually making out what the game is more than anything, and it's like your own imagination. And because it's so minimalistic, and your mind fills in the gaps, it automatically makes you more immersed. You think of about a good fiction book that you're like, it gives you the pieces, and then in your head you're putting it together, and then you're like sunk in if it's a really good kind of story that you can kind of believe in. It's kind of the similar thing here, where the minimalist design and such makes it more immersive, because your mind automatically fills in the gaps. And it's impressive to see, because I play a game like Action Hero, as I've mentioned many times in this podcast already, but that game's really fun, and that game has a very similar kind of mechanic and feel, but it's not as immersive as Superhot. And it's like, why? It's just not. It's just, and it may be because it gives you everything.
It's got other strengths.
Yeah, it's really good. Don't get me wrong, but it gives you everything. Where Superhot, because it doesn't give you that much, it makes it more immersive, if you know what I mean, right? It's amazing when it's a very much a game that stands at the top of like a great inspiration of what you can do with VR, with all the sensors and such.
Do you think it has something to do with the fact that the time does continue to move in Action Hero?
That might be it.
And so in Superhot, you're
controlling everything.
You're directly, like, time's absolutely only moving when you move. So you have a direct influence on it. Whereas with Action Hero, yes, you have an influence on it, but you're still more a part of the action shot.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're definitely right. I think this game just opens the door and just for the VR industry to see what's possible. I think there's a lot of games that probably wouldn't exist with that level of immersion without Superhot. You think of Batman Arkham Shadows combat mechanics, where time slows down and you move when you're punches and dodges. You could stretch and be like, maybe because of Superhot, that gave like an indirect influence to how that mechanic worked and such. Maybe not like they might not thinking it, but and such, but subconsciously, maybe because of how well Superhot did the combat in terms of the immersion and such. It could be the same with the what Batman could have stemmed for. Like there's you can see these little tiny pieces of indirect influences across a lot of really good VR.
A lot of breadcrumbs.
Games. A lot of breadcrumbs. That's the perfect way to say. Samson, let's wrap up here.
Let's close our thoughts out.
Let's wrap up. I think we've kind of gone through pretty much everything. Obviously, if there's anything else that you SuperHot fans are listening to this podcast want to mention, or just want to talk about like your own experiences and your own memories about the game and such, or if you've not played it before, go play it and let us know how you think it plays.
Get on out there.
Get on out there, send us the comments and such. But yeah, there it is. There's our first revisited episode in the books. I think it was really fun, actually. I think SuperHot VR deserves to be in the VR Hall of Fame for all the reasons that we kind of mentioned today. It suspends your disbelief, it has a really great mechanic, and it makes you feel like Neo in the Matrix. What's more not to love, But yeah, let us know what you think about this episode. If there's any feedback, this is obviously just the first in this series, so we're experimenting a little. We will be back with a regular episode next week, but this revisited series will continue. We'll do another game in maybe 3 weeks or so. We'll figure that out. If you have any game suggestions, let us know, or some game that you want us to cover. Remember the criteria. I mentioned this in the last podcast. It has to be available on Quest today. Because I don't have a PC and that I can't play it and such. And it's got to be an iconic or game that kind of just flew under the radar and such. It doesn't have to be one that we've played. Like, I haven't played Robo Recall, and I'm sure this is one of the games that we're going to cover. And also, it's got to be more of an older game as well. Like, you can't suggest a game. You can't just suggest Batman, for example. Like, maybe we'll get into that in 2029 if this show's continuing. But you've got to go a bit further back than that.
Dan, you're saying iconic, and maybe remember the G4 TV show Icons that I used to watch. So if anybody's into that, I think it's on YouTube. So
Icons,
G4 YouTube Icons.
Sweet. There we go, Samson. That was fun. That was a good time.
It was good. It was good to get back in this. It was nice to finish a game. Game was fun. It'd been a while since I've just hopped into SuperHot for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Send us a comment on Spotify, Discord, or DM us at all the different places. The links are in the show notes below. And I've been Dan. He's been...
I'm Samson.
I thought you were about to say I've been SuperHot. And,
super hot.
Amazing. And we shall see you next week.